This episode of Test Drive is brought to you by Ash Gregoire, with 32 dealerships across North America and over 3,000 vehicles in stock. The best way a Range Rover has ever been described is as a chariot of the gods. This, my friends, is a finisher car. It's not a starter car, this is a finisher car. And you can let me know in the comments below where that quote comes from. This is a 2014 Range Rover Sport SE. This is the first model year of the second generation Range Rover Sport. Now, what is this vehicle? It is a mid-size luxury SUV produced by Jaguar Land Rover, and it is the smaller version of the full-size Range Rover. And the size of this works really well. We compete with things like the Mercedes GLE, BMW X5, and other big vehicles like that. But this is only a two-row version here that we have to test today. This uses a 3-liter Supercharged V6 engine producing 340 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque. So I've had back-to-back supercharged engines over the past little while, and I have to say that the performance on it, it's not over the top, right? It's not meant to be either, but that supercharger allows you to get a little bit more power out of an otherwise pretty heavy car, and it makes it feel quite a bit different than just your traditional, whether it's a V6 or an inline-6 engine. So the supercharger makes a big difference on this. I'm glad that we have a chance to try this one. There are a number of options available depending on which version you went with. Our SE is kind of in the middle. It's pretty well equipped for a 2014 and gives you a pretty good idea of what you can get out of the Range Rover name for about $30,000 Canadian in today's money. Compared to the first generation Range Rover Sport, this one is 67 millimeters longer for the overall length and 178 millimeters longer for the wheelbase, which is huge. I mean, those are big numbers for this. You have better access to the second row. The doors are bigger back there, easier ingress and egress, so better functionality for this vehicle over the previous generation. And you could have had the 3-row depending on how you configured this vehicle, so if you were getting into that third row, it'd be a little bit easier with this generation. Now, I wouldn't be able to do this episode today on this 2014 Range Rover Sport SE if it wasn't for my friends at Ash Gregoire. They've allowed me to feature this vehicle for a week, getting a good idea of how it is to live with on a daily basis. And if you're interested in purchasing either this Range Rover Sport or any of the over 3,000 vehicles they have in stock at 32 dealerships across North America, you can save $200 off the purchase by visiting promo.ashgregoire.com/Nile. So for more information, head over to there. You can see their full inventory. They have a wide range of Range Rovers as well as other vehicles to suit your needs. So big thanks to them for letting us feature this vehicle. But what are you getting on a 7-year-old, at least as of filming this, Range Rover Sport? This one comes with LED daytime running lights, bi-HID headlights, front and rear parking sensors, a backup camera, though it's really off to the side and quite fish-eyed, but not bad considering most 2014s don't have backup cameras to begin with, as well as power folding mirrors. The original MSRP for this was about $62,600 in the US, and it has a tow rating of 7,700 pounds, which is really good, especially out of a V6 engine. It's pretty good overall. And I know a lot of you like to know what colors of vehicles we have. This one is Scotia Gray. It's kind of a greenish, looks kind of good, kind of similar actually to my Ford Focus, even though really nothing compares to that. But the idea is it's kind of a bluish, greenish gray. I like it, it looks good. Now, Land Rover says that this generation focused on better on-road driving dynamics. It has a fully independent suspension with a 260 millimeter front travel for the front suspension and 272 millimeters for the rear. It also has an air suspension allowing you to adjust how high the vehicle is or how low, with this mode right now being in the exit mode, the entry exit mode, so it's as low as possible, but there are some off-road modes as well. And it also uses the Terrain Response 2 system. Now that's interesting because this is one of the rare times that we're driving both a used vehicle and a new one from the same brand. This week I also have the 2022 Land Rover Defender, and it uses the same Terrain Response 2 system, despite the fact that there's about 8 years difference between the two vehicles. In terms of the exterior design, pretty traditional to what Land Rover was doing and still kind of is doing today, because this is the second generation. It's still the same generation being sold as a 2022, and while there was a facelift that changed the front end and rear end a little bit, for the most part it still looks kind of the same. So it's good for you if you're buying it in the used market, because it looks a lot more modern than it actually is. This being, again, about 7-8 years old, it still looks pretty new. Okay, so it doesn't have full LED headlights, but they were available available back in 2014. So there are a lot of things that you can get on today's vehicles that were available back then. So the design of it, I like it. Looks really good. Probably one of my favorite designs right now when it comes to a mid-size luxury SUV. I just think the proportions work great. Front end, absolutely fantastic with the Range Rover print on the front hood. At the back, looks really sleek with the clear taillights, the hidden wiper blade underneath the spoiler. Everything about it just works really well. So I do like the look of it, and you can tell that this is different from the full-size Range Rover because of the way that the side panels are designed. On this vehicle, it's pretty much flat. With the Range Rover, there's large vertical pieces. They go kind of in the door card and front fender area to distinguish it, and they kind of run along almost sort of similar to what BMW does with the 7 Series, not quite as big as they do here on the Range Rover, but the idea is this is meant to be a slightly smaller version of the flagship Range Rover, so it works out really well. I do like the design. Now, when we jump on the inside, it is, again, pretty similar to what you would get on a completely new Range Rover Sport. I like the look of it, like the functionality, and everything's there that you kind of need at this price point. We have front heated seats with power and 3 memory settings for both front seats. We have second row outboard heated seats, dual zone automatic climate control, and this one has the optional heated windshield. We have full leather seating throughout. The front seats also have their own independent armrests. That's something that is unique to Range Rover and something that we haven't seen before on front seats, especially ones that have center consoles. The only other vehicles I can think that have that would be minivans. It's usually because there is no center console. So if you're a smaller person, it's going to work out well for you. Somebody like me, I'm a little too big. I don't necessarily need them, but they are there to use. We have an 8-inch infotainment system, again with that backup camera. 4x4 settings are in the infotainment system, so you can see a lot of information about what the vehicle is doing if you are taking it off-road. We have a panoramic sunroof, LED interior lighting, the drive mode selector, and the terrain response 2 system. So a couple options in there. They're pretty basic. I mean, this vehicle is, again, meant more for on-road driving, but there are off-road capabilities with it that kind of go above and beyond what a regular vehicle would be able to do. I don't like to do a lot of off-road stuff, and I don't have the capability to do it, so I can't really test it at this time. But I do know that the Range Rovers perform incredibly well, even if you're going with something like this Sport. But aside from that, the interior space works out well. Front and rear seat space is great. I like the headroom, size, everything about it works really well, and the interior comfort is really good. Now we're going to take this vehicle on the road. We're going to talk about how it drives, performs, and rides, and everything else you need to know if you're in the market for a 2014 Range Rover Sport. Well, before we get into the nitty-gritty when it comes to our review, let's talk about the fuel economy. We did take this on our 100-kilometer test loop and completed it in 8.2 liters per 100 kilometers, which is pretty good for a mid-size luxury SUV. And not only that, but it's pretty good for an older one, this being a 2014. Now, I'm not going to tell you how it compares to the new vehicles because it doesn't matter, right? You know, whether you're buying a new car or not, the fuel economy is going to be quite a bit different. So for a 2014, that is great. Now, it would have been nice if we've tested some of the older cars on our test loop as well, but unfortunately we haven't. So take that information, use it however you may. But how about the way that this vehicle performs? Like I said, Land Rover set out to make this vehicle much more on-road oriented. Not saying that it took away from the off-road capabilities, but they wanted to make sure that the people who were buying this had a much better experience on the road. Because let's be real, folks, the majority of people who are buying these Land Rovers are keeping them on the road. They're driving them to school, to work, to the grocery store, whatever it may be. They're not necessarily going off-road. Now, sure, a segment of the buyers will be doing some off-roading with it, whether it's go to the cottage or going somewhere that doesn't necessarily have improved roads. It'll be a benefit. I don't see somebody taking this to the Rockies in Colorado and taking it over some of the test tracks there to see what it's capable of. So in today's date, more of an on-road vehicle, and I have to say it's very comfortable. You do have a couple settings for the air suspension. You have the exit entry mode, the normal mode, and you can raise it up if you do need to go over some larger obstacles. So the options are there, and it's really fast. Unlike some of the air suspension systems that take a few seconds, maybe even up to 10 seconds to fully lower the vehicle, this thing is almost like 1 second, boom, you're into the mode that you need to be in. So pretty straightforward there. The terrain response system, you push into the center little disc to be able to change into the different modes. We've got normal, we've got sort of like a grass, gravel, snow mode, mud and ruts and sand. So I keep it obviously in normal mode, and I just put it away. I just push the button in so it stays out of the way, cleans up my center console a little bit. Aside from that though, there isn't anything to surprise when it comes to the features on this. Yeah, we do have a heated steering wheel, heated front and rear outboard seats. That's all good. Dual zone climate control works very well. So I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, this comes very well equipped for a used vehicle. So you're getting quite a bit of Land Rover, quite a bit of Range Rover without having to spend a whole lot. And if you think about it, $62,000 US, that was the base price. You had to add on some of the features and options. So this probably was closer to like $80,000 Canadian, maybe more. So I mean, $80,000 today with a Range Rover doesn't get you a whole lot of Range Rover. So you do have a lot of option, a lot of flexibility with this. Now, I know what you're thinking though, the long-term reliability, that's the key. And it's true. You're not buying a Range Rover for the reliability. Nobody does. So far, with this vehicle, it has about 102,000 kilometers as of filming this. Everything works. And I know I say that when we do the vehicles that are older. I always kind of look for the stuff that doesn't work. So at 100K, everything's working well. The engine performs the way that it should. I don't have any check engine lights. Everything works. All the controls work. And it's even held up pretty well. The only real interior sort of wear is just on the gear shifter. And it's funny, it's the same gear shifter that we see on the Land Rover Defender, and a lot of the interior switches and controls are the same as well on that 2022. But that's the only thing that's kind of got some wear and tear. And I think probably whoever was driving it had a ring, some sort of sharp ring on their right hand, so when they were shifting it, because it's just on one side. The interior is held up very well. Everything works, so I'm pretty happy with it. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the things to look out for if you're in the market for one of these after a buyer's guide, as we always do. But I have to say, interior road noise, excellent. Comfort, excellent. Going over the bumps and everything, really good. I mean, this has truly shown me what a Range Rover can do, and it just continues to surprise me that this is a 2014. It works so well for a vehicle that is 7 years old, and I know it doesn't sound like much, right? For most cars, I think they said that now the average vehicle age in North America, or at least on American roads, is like 11 years or something now. So this is under that. But when you think about Land Rovers, you're not holding on to these ones as much as some of the original ones. But I gotta say, I'm very impressed with it. I really enjoy driving it. It has nothing to do with sort of the look or the prestige that comes with driving a Range Rover. Don't get me wrong, that definitely helps. But it's just everything comes together in such a good way. I'm very, very happy with it. And you can almost congratulate BMW for the success of this, or Ford for the success of this, but really it comes down to Land Rover doing a very good job. They've been traded through a number of companies over the decades, but they have shown us that as a subsidiary now of Tata, they're doing some pretty good stuff. So I'm very impressed with this Range Rover. I can definitely see myself owning one of these. I do like it quite a bit. We're going to talk about some of the performance stuff though, because obviously with a supercharged engine you expect it to be quick. This one, not quick necessarily, but it gets the job done. So here, taking it around a corner, I pretty much stay completely level in my seat, which is nice. Give it a little bit of gas. Has to find the right gear, but it gets the job done. There's no flappy paddles or anything. There are shift modes here, so if you wanted to, you can, they call it command shift. You can shift into the 8 transmission speeds there, but the transmission so far has worked pretty well. Aside from not quite knowing where you need to be, where you're in sport mode sometimes, for the most part, it works very, very well. So I have no complaints about the 4-wheel drive system. Not that we've been able to test it a whole lot, but it does get the job done. So everything mechanically about it, I've been very happy with. How does this compare to the BMWs or the Mercedes-Benz though? That's the thing. I mean, that's the tough one, because BMW is more sport-oriented, Mercedes is more luxury-oriented, Land Rover is supposed to be more off-road oriented. So let's see, we're going to go from a dig here. There's no launch control or anything, let's be honest here. Holy crap, right off the line there. Now, I wasn't flooring it completely, and we're at 100. That's really good performance. If you're watching a lot of the content that we do here on Test Drive, you'll probably have seen the video that we did on the Mercedes GLB, and that thing just would not go off the line. Even if you tried to put it into launch mode, it just was like a little bit of a delay there. But this thing, ooh, buddy. So you've got some good performance out of this thing. Like I said, it's a supercharged V6 engine. It's hard not to like that. Oh, it goes, man. It's so smooth. Oh, I really like it. I really, really like this one, man. Enjoyable. Nothing to fault about it, at least from a 1 week driving perspective. We'll talk about the things you need to look out for, which is what we're going to be doing now. Let's head back to the studio where we'll go over the buyer's guide if you're in the market for a second generation Range Rover Sport. Alright, so what's the Land Rover Defender doing here in the video? Well, not much really. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I had both of these vehicles here this week, giving me a good idea of what a slightly older Range Rover has to offer and what a new Land Rover has to offer. But it is interesting, there are some shared parts between these, not necessarily mechanics, but a lot of the interior trim is pretty much carried over from this onto the new Defender. So we just happen to have them both here. You can kind of see that there's a huge difference. Both of them are in the exit mode, so they're as low as possible with the air suspensions, yet the Defender sits quite a bit higher. But let's talk about some of the things you need to know if you're in the market for a used Range Rover Sport. Now listen, there's a lot of people out there who will tell you just to avoid any of them, period, not to even waste your time. And maybe, but there are some issues with these cars, as there are with any luxury vehicles. I'm not saying not to look into it, but you should be better informed if you're going to be doing so. So for example, with the Range Rover Sport, things like the front lower suspension arms can cause problems. You hear knocking at lower speeds. Those can be replaced. They're pretty simple to do. Another issue could be inadequate differential lubrication. To be fair, I don't think a lot of people change the oil, change the fluid in the differentials on any vehicle, let alone something like a Range Rover Sport. So keep that in mind. You want to be doing that every 50 to 80,000 kilometers, and you might hear whining sounds at speed when you're driving. That's the differential. The air suspension can leak. That's pretty common for any vehicle with an air suspension. There are electronic issues. Again, like any top-end luxury vehicle, you're going to have issues with that. A lot of this stuff was still pretty new tech back in the day, so keep an eye out for that. Things like the infotainment system could have issues. The seats as well. I've seen that there are issues where the seats won't move anymore. Our example here, everything works great, but keep that in mind. The sunroof can leak, as well as the engine can develop some leaking as well. So take a look at the vehicle. We always recommend anytime you're buying a used vehicle, whether it's a Range Rover Sport or something a little bit more affordable, you want to take it to a trusted mechanic to make sure that everything is checked out. Take it to somebody you know, take it to somebody you trust, have it looked over, get the service history if you can. It's kind of hit or miss with some of these vehicles. I feel that a lot of these Range Rovers are onto their second and third owners now, so you might not get the full service history for the vehicle. But if it's a little bit newer, you can actually put the VIN in on Land Rover's website, and they'll give you a breakdown of service that was done at Land Rover dealerships, as well as any recalls that may or may not have been done on the vehicle. So you can do that online. Take a look and see what else you can find about the vehicle before purchasing. Like I said, these are expensive vehicles new, about $80,000. These can get really expensive as well. I mean, if you were to buy a brand new 2022 Range Rover Sport, going for the top end stuff could come up to $200,000 if you go for the top end SVR performance versions and add on all the kit and features and all of that. So price is definitely very high. You want to make sure that you're maintaining it at that level, not cheaping out on it. Then you're going to have issues. But I've enjoyed my week with this. As I mentioned, it's the first Range Rover that I've driven, the first Land Rover that we've done here on Test Drive. We have both of them, so I can see how they both compare. And I have to tell you, okay, the tech is a little bit older on this Range Rover Sport, but I really do like the drive of it. There's nothing wrong with the Defender. It's just a slightly different experience than you get with this Range Rover Sport. And I'm finding between the two, I do try to take the Range Rover Sport out more, just because I like the ride, I like the comfort, and I like everything about it. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Test Drive. If you did, please consider giving a thumbs up to the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and if you have any questions about the car or anything else, please leave a comment below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.